life, God of many names. May this time we share together be one of enlightenment, encouragement, and hope. May we be granted the courage to be open-eyed about our broken system of justice, so that we may take brave action in the face of injustice. May those who are incarcerated not be forgotten. May those who are incarcerated not forget their own worth, their own dignity. May we all remember we are all children of God. In the name of all that is holy, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Welcome, everybody. We wanted to let everybody know that this is being recorded. We'd also, since we have opened this up to people outside of our church, which is First Unitarian Universalist Church, we'd like you to put, if you would, in the name, beside your name, add your affiliation so that we can all see where we're from and get to know each other a little bit as we carry on this discussion of this important video. Racially Charged is a product of a nonprofit that produces films that have to do with social justice. It's called Brave New Films, and it was directed by Robert Greenwald. America's Misdemeanor Problem exposes how our country's history of racial injustice evolved in an enormous abuse of criminal justice power. 13 million people a year, most of them poor and people of color, are abused by this system. The primary inspiration for this documentary comes from Alexandra Natapoff's book called Punishment Without Crime, which offers an urgent new interpretation of inequality and injustice in America by examining the paradigmatic American offense, the lowly misdemeanor. This film can evoke strong emotions. Our minister who did our opening, Reverend Diane Daugert, will be available as a chaplain if you would like to speak with her. And if you do want to speak with her, we'd like you to get in touch with Caleb, who is labeled today as Fun Faith Development, and you can individually chat with him in the chat. Instead of responding to all in the chat, you would respond to Fun Faith Development, and he will assist you and Reverend Diane in getting into a separate breakout room so she can talk with you. Following the film, we will have a discussion, and then we will hear from the co-chairs of the Criminal Justice Task Force of NOAA, Sean Witzel and Jane Borum. So stay tuned, and at the end, we'll have you participate in an action related to their task force in NOAA. We'll now present the movie, Racially Charged.
Biggest misconception about misdemeanors is that they are minor.
To start hearing more and more stories of voter suppression, that broke my heart.
They're the ones that are using the system.
My grandma was fighting for integration back in her day, and I'm fighting for the same thing now.
The
problem is the system is working the way it's supposed to.
We're recording.
Sorry.
Sometimes I feel like my life ended that day.
My car died on the side of the road. A cop walked over to my car and asked me if I needed help, and I said no.
John Clark was convicted on a misdemeanor gambling charge and was forced to work on a chain gang.
I just remember being pushed, like being cornered into a wall.
I was just starting out life.
And I didn't think I had anything to hide.
Mary Gay was sentenced to 30 days, plus court costs for stealing a hat.
I was arrested that evening.
It was a misdemeanor. That was the beginning of the nightmare that I had to go through.
Henry Nelson was arrested for using abusive language in the presence of a female and was sent off to the coal mines.
He said, "You're going to jail." And I'm like, "What for?"
Misdemeanors have historically been the chump change crimes that we didn't pay attention to.
I've done nothing. Man, I just got beat up by the police last night. I could have lost my life.
13 million. That's about 80% of all American criminal dockets. 80% of what our criminal courts do is misdemeanors.
Got him in cuffs, look. I ain't doing nothing.
The story of misdemeanors is the story of law enforcement continuing to prioritize African Americans, Mexican immigrants, America's so-called criminal class.
Hey, you act like I really just committed a serious crime.
You did do something illegal. You crossed the crosswalk.
You might see 2 or 3 police standing here waiting for you.
And cops will jump out of the van anytime, anywhere.
That's what I was joking.
The misdemeanor system has not gotten its fair share of blame. Misdemeanors are the invidious first step in the racialization of crime in this country.
Too often, arrests for minor crimes devolve into police violence and death for Black and brown people.
They got me for jaywalking.
Not wearing a seatbelt. My tail light was out.
I was arrested for being home.
Driving with a suspended license.
My license got suspended because I didn't know I had
I was drunk, and I was for this big claim that I was in charge.
I want $744 fine because I couldn't pay back.
And how far back that goes is a really dark story. Reconstruction was an era when 4 million African Americans made it out of bondage and were able to achieve at really high levels, whether it was in business, in education, different ways of prosperity that really threatened white supremacy.
They elected many Black men to positions of power. Of course, that was a sea change from how power had been exercised during slavery, and a lot of white folks just didn't like it. They were nostalgic for the old days of overt white supremacy, and so they subverted Reconstruction.
If you look at misdemeanors and you track them from the Reconstruction era to modern day, you see the fingerprints everywhere of white supremacy and control of Black bodies.
The landowners, they had nearly lost everything. And the only way to get that back is to somehow corral the Black labor force back onto the same plantations that they had once worked.
The most effective way of forcing African Americans back into this condition that would be so similar to slavery was to begin to criminalize Black life itself.
Misdemeanor offenses for incredibly trivial or made-up things, what should have been tiny penalties for non-existent offenses, turn into years of people's lives.
Where were you taken? I was taken out to the camps. Where did you sleep? Slept on some hay. Chain was on me.
I'm being put into handcuffs. I'm being dragged into this cold space. I don't have anything to cover myself. And I'm asked to sit inside of this tiny little room, and I have no idea why I'm there.
Was there any jury that tried you? No, sir. Did the recorder ask you whether you wanted a lawyer? No, sir.
And I thought that I would have time to talk to a court-appointed attorney so we could talk about what happened. And I could ask them to get other, pieces of evidence that would prove that, hey, I'm poor. It wasn't like I was trying to run off with this money.
Did they furnish any copy of the charge against you? No, sir, they did not. Did they give you any opportunity to plead to any accusation? They never gave me anything at all.
When they asked me how I pled no contest. I didn't understand that no contest is the same as guilty, and that I would walk away with a misdemeanor that would affect my ability to get hired.
The justice system after emancipation was weaponized against Black people. It perpetuated slavery by making the mechanisms of enslavement pretty much the same. Family separation, backbreaking labor, people having no rights. You could be sold on the steps of the courthouse that you were convicted in and given to the highest bidder.
A whole separate criminal code that applied to African Americans was established.
Many misdemeanor offenses are best understood as mechanisms of social control. They're not designed to catch dangerous or guilty people, but rather they are tools. We give them to police as additional ways of exercising their authority.
Some of these laws were overtly race-based, and with others then and now, the understanding was that the laws would look race-neutral, but they would be applied and enforced almost exclusively against Black people.
For these governments to sell prisoners into slavery, you first have to arrest lots of people. There's a big problem with that, though. There's just not enough crime for this system to work and for it to be profitable. The state governments of the South had to invent new crimes.
Southern legislatures, which are essentially run by Confederates at that time, are trying to reinscribe a form of slavery through a system of laws called Black Codes.
A whole category of new statutes passed in almost every southern state that attached these enormous penalties to what were in reality very minor thefts. Those were laws, and many others like it, that were only ever enforced against African Americans. And so it became a way to have a basis for arresting huge numbers of Black people.
I don't remember much about writing the check.
John Owen was caught taking 6 ears of corn from a cornfield and was arrested under the Black Codes.
This is $4, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times 4 is $28. So just this pile right here is how much I went to jail for.
Owen was put in jail for months until he was finally tried for theft.
To have a theft charge, it's theft by check.
I had money in the bank, but I didn't know how long it took for checks to process. Like, I know better now. I could have donated plasma, gotten $25.
Under his sentence, Owen was leased into convict labor and sent to the chain gang, where he served 2 years for the corn and a 3rd year for the court costs.
I was in the Hays County Jail for a total of 45 days for $25 worth of food.
Michael Brown, who was the teenager who was killed by police in Ferguson, whose death led to the explosion of the Black Lives Matter movement, he was stopped for jaywalking. He stepped off the sidewalk and was walking in the street, and there was a local criminal ordinance that made it a crime to do so. African Americans are being cited for jaywalking at 3, 5, 10 times the rate of white pedestrians.
The legislatures of the white South make it a crime to walk alongside a railroad. In an era in which there are no paved roads, the easiest way for a poor person to get from one place to another is to walk alongside a railroad. That law didn't say this only applies to black people, but those were laws that were only ever enforced against African Americans.
All of us engage in what would be considered to be minor crimes. And for some people, it's crossing the street at the wrong time. But if you're black or brown, then it becomes categorized as something that's criminal.
So what is I doing? Didn't use your crosswalk.
All I'm trying to do is go home, man. I'm tired. I just got off of work.
Nandi Kane says he was walking home from work when it happened.
Because I felt like they were gonna draw a gun out and shoot me in my back.
I'm tired of all this shit, man.
Vagrancy laws were passed that essentially meant any black person who was found on the streets unemployed and couldn't show evidence of work was a criminal, a vagrant.
Trespass laws originate from this idea that African Americans only belong in certain spaces and at certain times. And so they give police officers the ability, under the guise of law, to dictate where an African American person can be, what time they can be there, and how they can operate in certain spaces.
My kids' daycare was inside of one of the buildings to the Skyway, so I figured I'd take a walk, find somewhere to sit down, and wait on them to get there.
I'm going to New Horizons to pick up my kids. I was sitting there for 10 minutes.
Monroe Dolphus was standing in the train yard when he was grabbed by the sheriff's deputy. Monroe stated that he had not committed any crime.
Wait. You're gonna go to jail. I'm not doing anything wrong. Hold on. Can you please? No, come on, brother. I'm not your brother. This is assault.
At this moment, I saw my children's daycare class and their teachers and everything walking past while this was happening. He took the taser and drove it into my leg, and pretty much at that point lost all control of the leg.
The deputy later claimed that the crime committed by Dolphus was taking a 25-cent tin of fish from the lunch pail of a Southern Railway worker. Unable to provide any evidence to support this, the charge was changed to vagrancy.
And I kept asking them what I was being charged with. They'll create false charges just to make sure that everything is perpetuated.
Judge Longshore found Dolphus guilty of misdemeanor vagrancy and sentenced him to 5 months and 20 days of hard labor in the mines of Tennessee, coal, iron, and railroad.
Going back to the vagrancy laws of the late 19th century, the people who make those laws have in mind another group of people for whom there is an inherent threat to their livelihood, like breaking barbecue ordinances in public parks or sleeping in dormitories that white people don't think you live there.
I have every right to call the police.
It allows law enforcement to regulate whether or not certain behavior for one group of people is deemed criminal and another group of people is just frivolous activity.
Many people remember the Starbucks debacle in Philadelphia. There were 2 African-American men at a Starbucks. The employee had them arrested for loitering where they're clearly not engaging in that behavior.
What did they get called for? Because there were 2 black guys sitting here meeting me? Yes,
Loitering is a police tool of choice. It's the go-to offense that police often use to impose their authority. In the misdemeanor system, there is no conduct too minor, no act too small that the state cannot render a crime.
Black people charged with a misdemeanor are 75% more likely to be locked up than white people. You have to realize that these laws didn't happen by chance. They were part of a system to continue to oppress black bodies.
Our misdemeanor system includes all kinds of offenses, and some of them can be quite serious. Domestic violence, DUI, but most of the time, we treat minor, harmless conduct as misdemeanors. Traffic offenses, jaywalking, order maintenance offenses, spitting, driving on a suspended license for failure to pay a fine. And yet, these minor, meaningless misdemeanors can have terrible consequences for individuals. To understand the misdemeanor system, follow the money.
The accused are paying for the judges, the prosecutors, and the public
They made
defender.
more than $3.5 million off phone commissary at the jail. It's a known moneymaker.
They call it the $20
Time a
ad.
family member transfers money in jail.
Pocketing leftover money from the inmates'
about
food budget.
$2,000 a month in e-cig
They are a
sales.
controversial food vendor with a big
fraud,
state contract.
waste, and
Tonight,
abuse.
Aramark is
The
in
company
spotlight.
that uses inmate workers.
Today's system is estimated at $80 billion. The misdemeanor side of it is a way of saddling people with fines and fees that will put money in the pockets of the administrators of that system.
The first time I got a ticket, my insurance had lapsed. So I got the speeding ticket and I got a no insurance ticket at the same time. The next time I got pulled over, I was arrested for driving with a suspended license. I paid the tickets, paid the court costs, paid my fees and fines, but they said for driving with a suspended license, the punishment for that is we're going to suspend your license for 2 years. I would often have to choose between paying my inspection or my registration or paying my light bill or other bills that I had. I had to drive my car to get to work because I had a construction job. If I needed to take material to the job, I couldn't take plywood or 2x4s on a bus.
I felt like there was no way I was gonna be able to take care of the kids on my own while you were out because I didn't know how long you were gonna be in jail.
This officer saw me, a young Hispanic guy, driving a 63 Impala and said, you know what, that guy, he's up to something. I was trying to go to work, trying to pay bills, and he's treating me like a hardened criminal. That misdemeanor charge ended up becoming something that I couldn't get rid of.
They're being treated as revenue sources, charged daily fees for being in jail, supervision fees, tether fees, drug testing fees, database fees, to fund bail bondsmen, private probation companies, electronic monitoring companies, drug testing companies. It is disturbingly similar to the way that we saw African Americans being exploited in the post-war South.
I'm DeMario Davis, linebacker for the New Orleans Saints. I was born and raised in Mississippi, pretty much raised by a single mom. Entering into my second year of college, me and a teammate were caught shoplifting groceries from Walmart. It kind of felt a lot more like a drug bust than us having stole some groceries. The bail was set at $10,000 and I didn't have $10,000. The football coaches bailed us out. A misdemeanor, you're supposed to be able to be in front of the judge within 90 days, but this is not happening. This is not happening in our country. We have people who are spending 7, 8 months in jail who have not even been sentenced.
Cop arrested me and I was charged with the misdemeanor.
The term chain gang was coined on account of the shackle worn by convict laborers.
They said, okay, listen, we're gonna let you go home now. But Scram's gonna come and put a monitor on you.
They were taken to an anvil, where a rivet was pounded into the ankle cuffs to keep them closed. Then the cuffs were chained together.
The initial fee to get on the Scram was $250. That's just to have it put on. Then after that, they charged me $220 a month for the actual monitor.
Many of the convicts suffered from shackle sores, ulcers where the iron ground against their skin. Gangrene and other infections were also common.
Right after they put it on me, you start causing these really severe sores and rashes. And their attitude pretty much is, it's court ordered, it's by a judge, and you'll wear it, or you can go back to jail.
The emaciated convict laborers worked their entire days barefoot, but the shackles were always on their ankles. They mined in them, slept in them, and those who died of disease or beatings were buried in them.
What they're doing is unjust. What they're doing is profiteering, because you're paying them. You're their slave with their shackle on your foot.
I remember this hopeless feeling just overcome me. I couldn't take care of my family.
The biggest misconception about misdemeanors is that they are minor. The full consequences of getting a misdemeanor can be astronomical.
It hurt me for 10 years, and it completely disrupted my life. And I have been trying to figure out how to get my life back on track. This will be a part of my story for the rest of my life.
When people are booked into jails for a week or a year or even a day, you just cannot avoid the trauma that's inflicted upon you. The moment you hit the jail, you don't come out of that unchanged or untouched. You witness trauma, you witness violence, and it changes you. It changes your community.
I tried to get a job at Amazon where my roommate worked. I called to Walmart and I called to several other retail stores. I got turned away because I had a misdemeanor charge for theft.
Not enough people talk about what it means to have a misdemeanor on your record. It can determine the kind of job that you get, to the kind of housing that you can qualify for, to the kind of schools that you can go to. A lot of people are harmed for life because of the smallest infractions.
They're being rendered homeless. They're going without food, without medication. Their children are suffering.
Due to misdemeanors, I lost my housing. Shortly after that, I lost my vehicle, which led to me losing my job. And it was just one thing after another, like kicks to the face. I had full custody of my children. They had to get to school. We had to sleep in the car, waking up at like 4 in the morning, getting to a laundromat to make sure that they have clean school uniforms.
I had worked so hard and all of that was ruined by one charge. One misdemeanor ruined my ability to get even just basic work.
They can't get a job if they have to check a box that says they've been convicted of a crime. They can't even rent housing because they got poor credit when they received a ridiculous $500 speeding violation. So this system was designed both to extract from people, but also to marginalize their presence in society.
It's finna be a mass grave site.
This is a dormitory. The stupid crowd. These are the beds. They right beside each other. And this is the space.
Everybody just dying and getting sick and shit. Like, this shit serious as fuck. Bro, you alright? You want me to go get the police?
No.
What have you done this bitch?
You ain't gonna do nothing about it.
This motherfucker literally in this bitch dying, bro. I don't know what to do.
One of the worst places to be during this pandemic is locked up in jail.
The judge never said, I'm sending you to prison to die.
The same horror story is emerging of the unchecked spread of infection and inmates essentially being left to die.
Now, jaywalking or theft of a small amount or any sort of vagrancy type of behavior can lead to your incarceration and eventual contracting of the virus and death.
I've been in jail for 2.5 months for petty theft, a nonviolent crime that carries a misdemeanor charge for the price value of less than $100. There's been 3 deaths, 2 being inmates, 1 being a guard. As far as like people who are working for the facility, they're like intertwined. They could easily be catching it. How one of the guards caught it. My life is in danger.
These human beings aren't valued enough for us to apply the same kinds of safety measures there that we are in other sectors of society. If it wasn't already bad enough that you are booked into jail because you didn't have the money to pay the ticket and your license is suspended, that is now life-threatening to you.
Sheriff's Office is now releasing non-violent inmates as a next step in mitigating the spread of COVID-19.
Hundreds of inmates have been released from Shelby County's jail in an effort to put fewer people at risk for coronavirus.
600 inmates
A total of 38 inmates are ordered to
They were
before their
inmates.
time is up.
Now they're freed people.
Because of COVID-19, thousands of misdemeanor defendants are rightly being released. It's clear that these individuals should have never been incarcerated in the first place. We can tell by the fact that after these releases, we haven't seen any sort of crime wave. There's a different type of crime wave that should concern us, though, and that's the crime of violence against Black people post-Civil War.
State violence has historically been used to intimidate people of color, especially Black people. We see this all throughout history.
Misdemeanors, they have almost nothing to do with public safety. What misdemeanors do is give police an extraordinary amount of discretion with any minor offense premised on the idea that the Black man is a threat.
Misdemeanors are a very specific mechanism that legalize violence toward Black people and keep them in a very particular place, not just as individuals, but as an entire community of people.
When we look at so many cases in history, often what started as an investigation or a claim of a petty misdemeanor offense led to police officer-supported and sanctioned racial terrorism.
All too often, we see police exercising that terrible authority of violence against people who have only been suspected of the most minor of crime.
The problem isn't bad apple cops. The problem is the system is working the way it's supposed to.
Police shot this boy outside my apartment. They killed him.
Hey, bro! You move, I swear to God! Hey, boss! Hey, boss!
I just did pretty. That's all. I'm so sorry. I have no gun.
Gray appeared to be unable to walk and was screaming as he was carried, feet dragging on the ground, to a police van.
I know, you just doing your job.
Mama, they gonna kill me, man, out here. I can't breathe. Please, you need my nigga. I can't breathe out here. Please.
My life could have so easily been taken in that skyway. George Floyd goes to show further that the most minor of offenses, even no offense at all, could result in death.
The very purpose of racial terrorism is control, is social control.
What we have seen in the killings of those accused was that misdemeanors became the gateway for police violence and murder.
We are seeing decriminalization. We are seeing citations instead of arrests. We are seeing people let out of jail. We are seeing pushback against fines and fees. But at the same time, there is so much more work that needs to be done.
Who defined what a misdemeanor is? The whole thing was built on exploitation, on racial violence, on building up industrial capitalism.
We should not be locking up people who speed, who are too poor to pay a fine or a fee, who loiter or trespass or jaywalk. They're not dangerous, they're not scary.
There's never been a good reason to lock up anybody for petty offenses. Like slavery back in the day, the law itself is doing the work of oppression. The criminal law is providing the authority to arrest Black people, to punish Black people, to kill Black people. And ultimately, the real crime is that we're Black.
All right, everyone. Someone put in the chat that that was a powerful movie. I don't think that that word even begins to describe it. So let's take a few minutes. Settle in your seat. I want you to give yourself the time and opportunity to process what you learned and give it the thought that it deserves. So we're going to take a minute or two of silence just to think and collect ourselves. All right, thank you. We have a couple questions or ideas just to generate some thoughts for you. And I wanted to say we don't have a whole lot of time, so these can be sparks for your own conversation, sparks for conversations with friends, or just to get you moving on your next action. Arlene, did you want to say anything before we start?
Yeah, thanks for that moment, though. Third time I've seen this, and I still needed that. We have a couple of guidelines for this discussion. We want to have everybody remain muted, and we're going to call on you from the chat. These questions are designed for you to put some responses in the chat. And if we ask for you to share an experience, then you raise your hand and we will call on you. We'd like you to enter into this discussion with an open mind and be non-judgmental as much as possible. When you make a statement, use an I statement. That seems to, help. And you're speaking from your own experience. So with that, we'll get into the questions. I think, Susie, you were going to do the first one.
All right. And some of you have already begun because you can't watch that movie and stay silent. So let's use the chat to put in a couple words, one or two, that jump into your mind after you watch that video. Encouraged, yeah, I agree with that. Overwhelming, distraught, angry, horror.
The innkeeper remembers. The state.
Guys, remember to mute yourself. Not surprised. That's so sad, but I agree. Very scary. Institutionalized racism. Yeah. Real. So we're all feeling the same kinds of feelings, sadness. It just makes you want to cry, doesn't it, after you get over being really mad? There are a lot of questions, you're right. Stay strong and be vigilant. Good. That's the message we hope to leave with today. Oh, yes. Those of us who are on the side with dark skin, brown and black skin, we have even more to be afraid of. All right. Thank you for your participation and your honesty. I'm going to turn you over to Carlene now.
Well, somebody mentioned not being surprised. In all honesty, I was surprised the first time I saw this. I didn't realize that some of the deaths that they mentioned, that we've had so many riots and demonstrations and, uprisings about, which, of course we want to change things. I didn't realize they were misdemeanors. So other than that, can you put something in the chat that surprised you, that you learned that you didn't know before, that did surprise you? How about jaywalking? Yeah, jaywalking, just walking in the street. The factual numbers, what was it, 13 million. The money, 80 billion. I had no idea about that. Paying for an ankle monitor. Yeah. The history of how misdemeanor laws came to be. The comparison between Reconstruction and the present. I was going to call on somebody to talk, and I'm having trouble getting my way around this. Happening so fast. Candy, do you want to speak a little to your surprise about the cost of ankle monitors? You want to elaborate?
It had never occurred to me that it caused harm to people's bodies in addition to having to pay for not being in jail.
Yeah. And Honey says, I did not know misdemeanor can lead to such a horrible outcome. I thought they were felony charges. You want to elaborate on that statement, Honey?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon now. It just seems to me that a misdemeanor, this shows my ignorance of the law, that a misdemeanor was something that, like a ticket, jaywalking a ticket. I didn't think that they would lock you up for, a misdemeanor charge. I always thought it was something like a ticket or littering. You get a ticket, you pay the fine, you move on. I I mean, why is it that a misdemeanor can land you in jail? It's supposed to be a misdemeanor charge that keeps you out of jail. It's just like breaking a law for keeping your environment clean or something. I had no clue.
Yeah, I didn't know, because remain on your record. I thought that was just felonies. Yeah, so we really need to educate ourselves about the system and correct the inequalities. Cindy, did you want to say anything else about the facts, about extent, terrible details, extreme similarity to the Reconstruction era? Cindy?
Yeah, it's different unmuting in this view. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I kind of felt like I knew the general story, but not exactly how many things are misdemeanors and what percentage of people of color getting arrested and convicted and so forth. And certainly I know a lot of this carries over from Reconstruction, but that having the effect, it was very effective that they would show similar cases from Reconstruction and today side by side. And it really made it hit home.
Thanks. Alice Anderson, I like your statement. It says, it seems nothing is new under the sun. The chains have gone to ankle bracelets. Well, that says it all. Okay, Susie, you want to take on another question? Thank you for your responses.
All right. If you have been part of a similar experience, if you've had a family member or someone you know who've experienced anything like we've seen in this film, and if you feel comfortable, we'd be so thrilled if you shared it with us. So raise your hand and we'll look for you. And I can't see everybody's hand, so.
Could use the hand that's in the reactions if you don't have your visual screen up.
I will start you all off. I have a family member who spent a short amount of time in jail, and I had no idea of the costs that are focused on these people. This person had to pay for the parole officer, for the device on her car, for all the court costs. I mean, it just went on. And here you have people that can't get jobs because of their charge. And now they have to pay all these horrendous fines. It's a terrible money-making proposition. Someone asked the question, if you have knowledge or a similar story like we've seen in this video and you feel like sharing it with us, we'd love to hear about it.
This is Honey. I am just amazed at the length of probation. I recently found out that they're giving you just multiple years of probation. Like you said, you have to pay for going to take a drug test, even if you don't have a drug charge. You have to pay for your probation fees. I mean, if the person does the crime and they get out and then they give them 5 to 10 years probation, that's just milking them dry.
Yes, you're right. Anybody else? Alice Anderson. Remember, I can't see everybody's hand, so just give me a hoo-hoo.
I just want to say that, hello, good afternoon. I would like to say that I did have a family member that was on the, involved in going to the prison years and years ago. I'm talking about during the early 1900s. A family member, because they could not find a job, so he was arrested for a misdemeanor, and that's what's on the family police charge that I saw on this prison record, was that he went to prison for not having a job, and it was considered a misdemeanor at that time. And so later on, they needed Black men to work, to join the World War II, to join World War I, I mean. And so he joined World War I. only because it was needed for him to do it. And the kind of work he did during World War I was emptying latrines and cooks and being a cook and stuff like that. It was just another menial job that he had, but he had to go to prison for a misdemeanor. And he was, matter of fact, he was my father. My father was born 1888, May 17th, 1888, and he was in World War I.
Thank you for sharing that. We did have a comment from Jane Borman that there's some pending legislature to reduce probation to a limited amount of time. Be good. Someone else mentioned, Patricia said she didn't think you could ask if people had a misdemeanor, just felonies. And I'm of that mind too. So obviously that's another thing that I don't really know about our system. Anybody else have a story about someone who has been impacted?
I can share my personal story.
Okay.
When I was in college, I was charged with a felony and a misdemeanor, and I spent a night in jail, but I was able to get out because I had a safety net to fall back on, and my parents came and bailed me out of my youthful trouble. And we paid a ton of court costs, things that I could not have paid out of pocket if my parents hadn't paid for me. So often when I see stuff like this, I think about how different the outcomes could have been. And the felony, both charges were dropped. But if I hadn't had the court costs, if we hadn't been able to hire a lawyer, I was in college. So if I hadn't been able to get out, I could have gotten kicked out of the school, and I almost was. So there's just a lot of strings and privileges that pulled in my favor to prevent that from being something that could have altered the course of my life in a really, really different way.
Thank you for sharing that.
I had a discussion just the other day, Chris, with my brother-in-law who shared a story of his teenage years. And as a white privileged person, he was let off. And I thought of that again, when I was watching this video. Yeah, it's definitely not applied equally in this society.
Yeah, no, if I was not white, I probably would have been shot for what I was doing.
We had a comment in the chat about sometimes folks aren't just charged with misdemeanors, but they're having mental health issues and they're caught in a bad place, can't explain themselves. And they sometimes get jail time or fines or records. So the system is certainly very challenging. Let's see if I have anything else.
It's sort of like being Black, being a criminal, criminalizing being Black. It also criminalizes mental illness. Similar.
Well, and as we saw, it doesn't affect just the person, it affects their whole family. Any other stories you all would like to share?
Yes, ma'am, if I may.
Yes, please.
I worry for my husband, actually. And I know I shouldn't because tomorrow is not promised to anybody. We have a biracial son. My husband is white. I worry for him because I am Black, but you have a spouse, your spouse will go to the ends of the earth for you. So I worry if I'm ever in that situation, how the police will turn on him because he's married to me and we have children, because he won't hold back. I know he won't hold back, because he's going to do what any man would do, protect his family. So there's a whole nother dynamic out there that's in play too. People who are involved in interracial relationships where their spouse happens to be Caucasian. That is a problem. That's a fast growing problem.
Thank you for sharing that, honey. Well, maybe is it time to move on to the final question?
We could do that.
I'd like someone to think, all of us to think for a minute. What would you What is one thing that we could do in the city of Nashville to change this? If there was one thing, what would you think we should do? And raise your hand, and I'd love to call on someone, because this is the kind of question that's hard to write in the chat.
Hello, my name is Alice Anderson. I would suggest that the judicial system would reevaluate the misdemeanor charges and count it exactly as what it is, something that just happened, that the individual doesn't need jail time or anything like that, and to drop those. So we were not spending lots of money on misdemeanor charges, court costs, bail fee, or what have you, whatever financial charge that needs to be dropped. It doesn't, it's just a misdemeanor. A smack on the hand or what have you, and don't do it again. We don't need to have people spending time away from their families because of a misdemeanor charge. The men and women that are sent to jail, a lot of times they have children to take care of. So the bills fall behind. The families end up having to move out or find some other type of house or even go homeless because they may be living from paycheck to paycheck, which is a lot of us that are living paycheck to paycheck. And so when something dynamic like that happens, it affects, it's a domino effect throughout the whole family, trying to get money up for court costs and everything else just because a person jaywalked across the street or some other little minor thing that an individual did as a catastrophe in the entire family. And it puts a blemish on the person's record where they can't find a job. So they're back out there again, struggling. And everything else that they don't qualify for because of this tiny little mistake that they made. So what probably used to be a little thing has now become a big thing, but it's still a misdemeanor. And I wish that it would just stop. And we have to do something about stopping it. That's all. Just stop it.
Stop it. Chris, you want to talk a little about your idea of lobbying our employers? Chris Hornsby?
Yeah, it's one thing I've talked to the leader of my organization about. It's just working with, I know there's different organizations in Nashville that especially focus on placement for people that were recently released from prison or people with felonies on their records. And Project Return is one in the Wedgwood, Houston area. So places like that, if your company is the kind of place where that's an appropriate thing to do and that would work out, just giving people economic power back.
Thank you.
Patricia Merritt's hand has been up for a while.
Thank you for pointing
she
that
may be
out.
on the other page, so Patricia.
Patricia, please.
Thank you. I guess my point of view comes really from a mixed side. I've seen the criminal justice system from the standpoint of, I formerly worked for TBI. I actually worked for the Board of Probation and Parole, and my last stint with government was with TRICOR, which is Tennessee Rehabilitative Initiative and Correction. And I guess when I think about and hear these things, it's, some of my comments is disheartening. I'm not surprised because I could see, having had access to the data, the inequities in the sentencing. I could see, as I called on corporations about trying to hire people post-release, I tried to inform them that 95% of those that are incarcerated are going to come out and be in our system. Now, I was dealing with people who were felony offenders. So when we have this whole conversation about misdemeanors, it really does further put me at a place of distraught. I was in Wisconsin and about to jaywalk, and I was thankful that somebody pulled me back up on the street and said, "Girl, you can't do that here." And I was like, "Oh, okay," but there were no cars coming. They said it doesn't matter. We have jaywalking laws. I had not a clue. So when you think about what takes somebody into a misdemeanor charge, and the fact that it empowers people, law enforcement, to make a decision, well, I think this is a misdemeanor, and then you lock people up. When you hear these things, and when I listen to this and I watched this 30-minute documentary, it just further burned in my spirit, which is why I made the comment about the application process. If it doesn't ask you specifically, did you commit a felony? Then if you committed a misdemeanor, don't put it on there. But I dealt with companies that would not hire people from a felony conviction perspective. And my comment to them was, if we don't make them a part of the system, then what do you think is going to happen? You know, we cannot continue to fund the prison industry at $1 billion plus a year when we're not even educating people. When folks talk to me about the pipeline to prison, I tell them I'm committed to blowing up the pipe and lining everybody up for success. People are going to come out. And what I used to tell CEOs when I called on them is, but by grace, there go you and I. You know, at the end of the day, when we look at the impact that we have an obligation, we're all entitled to second chances. I don't know not one person walking around here that is flawless. I said, and probably the difference between me and you and them is that we probably did it and we just didn't get caught.
That's right.
I appreciate so much the comments from Chris about having the access to the resources. So many times Black and brown people don't have folks in the community with which they can reach out to and have a conversation with a judge and let them serve their time locally, and all the things that go with jail credits. I mean, this thing is complicated, but it can be solved. And so I think part of it is you got to change the laws. You got to educate people. You got to get people embracing the fact that we are in a diverse society. Like the young lady that talked about being in an interracial marriage, this is real, people. And if you go back and look at it, we're all, nobody's pure. So, you know, and we can have that discussion later, but when you look at it, we all have something in somebody that has been touched by a system that is horribly broken. And even when you bring this down to our juvenile system, it's just awful. So we have to do our part. We have to hold our legislators accountable. We have to change these laws. We have to make it reasonable to hold people to the time period of hearing cases on a timely manner. You know, if you get brought in, if you're supposed to have a case hearing within 90 days or whatever the time period is, you do it. You know, this is the cycle of violence, just like in domestic violence. You know, you have this, you use your power of control to keep people down. Time out for foolishness. We have to step forward and say, we got to make a change, and we each have to be part of that change. And for that,
thank you, Patricia. Yeah. Oh, let's see. I'm messing up my screen here. Thank you so much. That was very good. I have one more person with their hand up. We're running out of time. But Pat and Trig, do you want to say something just for a minute on this, and we'll move on to our guest speakers?
Just to be real quick, I don't know if this idea could morph into something that would work here, but when we were on vacation in Mexico, actually the expats had set up this program where people could, and this was just people who needed food, but I'm thinking about how we might be able to reverse this. They could go on, the city had a list of what needed to be done that day. For example, you know, clean the graffiti off of the wall on such and such a street. And you signed up to do something like that, and you could get your food for the day or whatever. And I'm just wondering if there's some misdemeanor option that people could have where we could take care of solving some problems for the city, and also the person would be off the hook.
Yeah, something that restorative justice kind of an approach, where the actual solution fits the crime somehow. Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful thing to share too. I appreciate everybody's answers. This is a complex situation, like Patricia said, and we have to study more. I'd like to introduce now two guest speakers, the co-chairs of the Criminal Justice Task Force from NOAA, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope. We have with us Sean Witzel and Jane Borum, and they're going to tell us a little bit about what their their task force does to change the inequities in our Nashville area.
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Sean Witzel, and I'm the co-chair of the Criminal Justice Task Force, and my co-chair is
Jane
Jamie.
Boer. Sean is going to talk to you a little bit about HEALS first, and then I'm going to talk about the courts and bail and judges.
Awesome. So we're super excited to be here. That documentary was extremely powerful, and it reminded me of other documentaries like The House I Live In and 13. And if you haven't seen those, I encourage you to do so. So for quite some time, NOAA has been working on a program called Nashville HEALS. HEALS stands for Health Engagement and Liaison Services. It's a mental health response based off the CAHOOTS model in Eugene, Oregon. And if a person is having a mental health crisis, then our response, we feel like there should be a mental health response and not the police. So Nashville HEALS pairs a mental health professional with a medic to go and respond to these particular instances, these crises that we see too often. We see too often in our communities where these people they might end up in jail just because they're having a health issue. And we don't want to see them end up in jail. We don't want to see them end up hurt or worse, end up dead because something that could have been handled got maybe taken out of, got blown out of proportion. So HEALS is something that that NOAA developed with the Behavioral Health Foundation. It's something that we got a lot of traction for last year during the budget season. We had some support from City Council. We had a lot of support from the community. HEALS didn't happen last year, but we were able to build a great foundation and build a lot of support, and we're using that to continue fighting for making it happen. We've made some strides, and we're going to continue working until it happens. And we ask that you learn more about HEALS. You can go to noatn.org to just plug into the organization as a whole, but there's information about HEALS. You can also put your emails in the chat and we can grab those and add you to our email list. And we hope that we can have your not just support as your congregation or member organizations of NOAA, but your support as individuals to help this cause and this mission. And also, before I turn it over to Jane, we have an event on February 3rd. We're doing a webinar where we have someone from CAHOOTS in Eugene, Oregon. Again, that is the program that we modeled Nashville HEALS after. And that person is going to speak, and they've had 30 years of success doing this. So that they're going to speak about some of their experiences, how they've been able to maintain that success and help the community. And we hope to do the same thing here in Nashville. So thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to Jane.
Thanks, Sean. As you may or may not know, the Criminal Justice Task Force is working on 3 foci. One is mental health diversion, which is what Sean just talked about. That's what HEALS would do. It would divert or deflect people out of the criminal justice system by treating them with a medical response to a medical condition. Then the second foci is to look at the courts and reduce the number of people being arrested, mass incarceration, just getting that reduced. So we're talking about cash bail reform as part of that, but we're also looking at the judges and how they're elected and educating people about those judges. So we'll be having a webinar on that come February 17th, and a judge candidate forum on March either 10th or the 17th. I'm not sure. We haven't decided which date, but all of the judges who are running in this upcoming May primary, we're hoping will participate, and you will get a chance to hear them and possibly ask questions. We haven't come up with just how the questions will be asked and who will moderate, but that would be a good opportunity for you to have a direct impact on finding out more about the judges. Then, of course, we also want to just keep working at getting our police department to take a second look at itself and to de-escalate, to have better trainings, to watch how they're recruiting police officers. The NAACP is working on this also. There are people who are hired who have some very fatal flaws in their backgrounds, which are overlooked. There are people who are currently police officers who have a known murder record. These are the kinds of disturbing facts about our police department that we want to have us look at. So anytime we can look at excessive force or the way the police department is administered, we're going to try to do that. We do have somewhat of a working relationship with some people in the police department. Things have gotten better since Chief Drake has become the chief. I'm not saying that all these problems are getting worked at as quickly as we would like them to, but the old chief, Anderson, was very stubborn, was very much of a control freak. And so at least Drake has a little more of an open mind and has people working under him who are receptive to having an ongoing discussion. As a matter of fact, on the Cahoots webinar that we're having this upcoming February 3rd, we've invited David Imhoff, who is in charge of what's called Partners in Care. That's the police mental health response system that they've started a pilot on, and it's just now going into its second quarter. And so we've asked Inspector Imhoff if he will be part of that too. So this would give you a chance to actually hear some of what the police department's perspective is. Just this whole notion of reimagining public safety is really crucial. I would like for you to look at the Metro Human Relations Commission's latest report on reimagining public safety. They had hearings in October and November, and they've just issued a report. So if you go on the government pages for Metro and look under Metro Human Relations Commission, you should probably be able to find that report there. If not, we can put a link of that onto our NOAA website. It's rather disturbing to read it, but it tells you specifically what changes need to happen from a whole variety of perspectives. So I think that gives you something to sort of start with. So do you guys have questions? So we don't do all the talking? Are some of them in the chat?
I would like us to talk a little bit about the judges survey, because I think we really want folks to hone in on that and complete it today. Elizabeth has her hand up.
You know, I've been in NOAA for a while now, and I didn't know about the criminal court justices, the judges. I didn't know who to vote for or what am I looking for. Like, why is bail set so high? Why are people charged so much for misdemeanors? And why are people not offered a probation equal to the situation?
Yeah.
So I started learning more, and one of the ways I learned was to take there's a survey that Erwin Venick and others put together, who are members of the Criminal Justice Task Force, and I put it in the chat, but I'm going to put it in the chat again right now. And it's one of the ways for us to make a change is to inform ourselves as people in the community what we want from a judge. Now, this is not Noah, this is just me, Elizabeth, that Robin Kimbrough is running for a judge in the 5th court. Is it the district? I don't even know how to say it. But she is
Division 5.
Division 5
of General Sessions.
She wants to make a difference. She has worked with a lot of people of color and people with mental illness. She doesn't want these large charges and the bail that's set so that people never get out of jail or prison. So anyway, I'm putting a plug in for Robin. The elections are coming up in May. So please, as educated Unitarians that we are, look at that survey and take the survey so you'll even be more informed. So when you vote in May, that you will know who to vote for. So that's enough of my on my platform.
Can I just make one more suggestion? This is a report that says best bail practices. This is fairly new. The bail bond committee for our court system came up with this. Now, these are guidelines. It's legalese. It's a little complicated to read, but if you have anybody who is an attorney that you can sort of ask for help with this in terms of digesting it and getting something out of it, I'd suggest that you do that. There are efforts at trying to have more common kinds of bail setting practices so that everybody is sort of using the same guidelines. That is what we were hoping for, and we're continuing to work with some of the judges. The judges are somewhat hesitant to let us in the door too much, but we have had some fairly decent discussions. And at this point, there's an argument going on between District Attorney Glenn Funk and our public defender, Martisha Johnson, about some procedural areas of bail setting. So we're hoping that we can get the judges to put pressure on them to come up with a common negotiated settlement on that, which would really clear the air and give all the judges, as well as the magistrates. You know, there are magistrates who work at night court, and they're the ones who initially see the person after they've been arrested, and they're the ones who are supposed to set up a hearing for a bail review. So we're trying to get all of that so that it's more streamlined and more have more commonalities to it, so that it's not, you know, one magistrate does it this way and another one does it this way. So those are some of the things that you can ask judges about in this upcoming webinar and judge forum that we'd be having in March. Thanks.
I just want to put a plug in. I see your hand, Elizabeth, but the survey is so important and it's easy to do. It only takes a few minutes. I did mine on my phone, but it's going to guide, if I'm understanding correctly, the forum when we talk to the judges. So when we sign off, take a few minutes on your phone. It doesn't take long, but it's important. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I stepped all over you.
No, I just wanted to say the importance, because remember the judge in Murfreesboro who arrested those children of color because they were trying to break up a fight? I mean, that's 2022. That's now. Those are the kind of judges that are in office now. And we have to change that. And it's hard to get your mind around the legal system and figure it out. But maybe people like Pat Merritt, who've been in it, will help us. But that's the kind of thing we're trying to do in the Criminal Justice Task Force. And so I hope you'll take the survey.
One of the things that the Criminal Justice Task Force has accomplished in the past is to put pressure on Nashville to form a community oversight board. And Sean is a member of that board. You want to talk about that, Sean, and what that group does?
Sure. So the Community Oversight Board provides community oversight of the police. So there was a huge push to get this board on the ballot. Nashville voted it in. And so we listened to the community. We listened to the concerns of the community. If someone files a complaint against a police officer, Then the MNCO staff investigates that, and it's led. The director is Jill Fitchard. I'm on the board. I'm not a part of the staff, but they lead that investigation to decide if next steps need to be taken, or if or what needs to happen after that. So the thing that I love about serving on the COB is that the people wanted this, the people demanded this, and the people got out in the streets, and people got out in the streets and they signed petitions and people voted for it. And so it hasn't been without its struggles. I've been on the board for 2 years. I wasn't on the first year, but I joined the second, and I know they had a lot of struggles just getting this thing off the ground, and there continues to be struggles. So I want the community to watch those meetings, to chime in, to come to them when they can. So if you ever have an opportunity to come to a meeting in person, or just watch them on when they're on television, that would be great, because we need the community to know what's going on and what roadblocks are put in front of the board. Because it's one thing to go and vote something in, but you can't walk away at that point. We need everybody watching and everybody engaged and chiming in. So yeah, I encourage you to learn more about the Community Oversight Board. There's a website. You can just type that in and continue to support us.
Do they have a regular meeting time?
Yeah, so we meet on the last Wednesday of the month, the fourth Wednesday of the month at 4 p.m. And it's usually at the Howard Building downtown, the Howard office building. I'm blanking on the official name of it, but where you go and get your tags renewed.
Tags,
and all
yeah.
that. Yeah. So typically we're in one of those rooms there.
Is that shown live on the TV, on that Metro channel?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, the Howard.
Well, we have 5 minutes. Does anybody have any other questions? If not, we'll go ahead and end the discussion. But if there are any other questions, we have a few more minutes. I'm not looking at the chat, I guess. All right. I'm not seeing anything come up. Susie, do you want to do our closing?
Sean, I have a question. Can you briefly share with us how one can become a member of the COB?
Sure. Yeah. So so the process is that you apply. Typically, some of the members of the board are appointed, but then others are nominated by a community organization. So you can you fill out the form, you apply, and then you interview, and city council is responsible for selecting who those people are. And there are openings or upcoming openings on the board. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to go on the website and get the process started.
Great. And are there term limits?
There are. There are different term limits, so they don't all expire at the same time.
Gotcha.
But I'm on the 3-year terms. There are like 1-year terms as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And NOAA's website is noaatn.org, and they have 4 areas that they're working on, criminal justice being one. They also work on affordable housing, economic equity, and the education task force. So these are the 4 areas of Nashville that we feel that are the most important for us to focus on and work on in NOAA. Okay, Susie, would you like to do the closing?
All right. I have one more question for Sean. My name is Alice.
Okay, good.
About, did you say the acronym is COB?
Mm-hmm.
C as in Charlie?
Yes.
Is this offered in throughout Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, or is this just for Nashville?
This, our jurisdiction is just Nashville. There are civilian or community oversight boards in other cities. I don't know all the cities that they exist in, but it's definitely not throughout Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I would like to know what does the acronym stand for? COB. You said COB?
Community Oversight Board.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And I'm going to put a link in the chat to the COB website.
Thank you, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I feel like we've had such a kind of filling day intellectually, emotionally, and ethically. I just feel like I need a little rest to consume it all. And I want to thank everyone for coming. We really appreciate your comments, your interest, and your dedication. And since we are approaching Martin Luther King Day, I wanted to close with some of his words. And they focus on courage, because I think we're leaving today knowing that we're going to need a lot of courage to get the job done that we need to do. So there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right. Courage is an inner resolution to go forward despite obstacles. Cowardness is submissive surrender to circumstances. Courage breeds creativity. Cowardness represents fear and is mastered by it. Cowardness asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? All right. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see some of your smiling faces again in the near future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.